James Worthy is one of the better players the NBA has seen, and he was a key member of the Showtime Lakers with Magic Johnson and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was a perfect full-court partner for a lot of Magic's theatric passes, and if it wasn't for him, who knows if the Lakers are as successful as they were during Magic's era. But the crazy thing is, Worthy should have never been a member of the Lakers if it wasn't for an incompetent owner, perhaps the worst owner in the history of the NBA, a guy by the name of Ted Stepien, who ran the Cleveland Cavaliers from 1980 to 1983, and he traded away so many first-round draft picks that the NBA created the Ted Stepien rule, which says you cannot trade away first-round picks in successive seasons. Let me take you back to those 1980 Cavaliers. They had Mike Mitchell, a small forward who averaged over 20 points a game. That was about all they really had going for him, as he was like the lone guy who could be something in the NBA, I would say. They also had old man Walt Clyde Frazier, who didn't really do anything for them, but I think it's worth mentioning. They were not a good team. This was a team that you looked at and said, they need to embrace a rebuild. They need to hold on to as many first-round picks as they can, and it'll be a slow process, but they'll get there, they'll draft some good players, and they can slowly build this thing up. Stepien had other plans, as he wanted to build a winner as quickly as possible, and he would trade their next, 5 first-round picks, and none of them worked out. And so we can start with the James Worthy trade. In 1980, Stepien decided to trade the Cavaliers' 1982 first-round pick for a Lakers first, as well as Don Ford. Have you ever heard of Don Ford? Apparently he played the point guard position. I mean, this tells you everything. Does this look like a guy who was a big deal in the NBA? Well, he wasn't. And then that 1982 first-round pick turned into James Worthy. So, I mean, who does that? Who has a bad team, and then you trade your first-round pick just 2 years later for, a backup point guard? Any competent NBA owner would know not to do that, and James Worthy would have been a member of the Cavaliers. And, I mean, it could have been interesting to see because in one breath you could say, yeah, well, he wouldn't have those Lakers around him. He wouldn't have Magic who can set him up for fast breaks and cuts to the basket and all that. But in another sense, it would have been interesting to see Worthy with the ball in his hands more often, asked to create more frequently, and I mean, what could he have done? He was already a very good player attacking the basket, whether it be in cuts, but he was also a damn good post-up player, which I think is forgotten about Worthy a lot. So I think he still, I mean, of course he still would have been a very good player. It just would have been interesting. Perhaps he would have put up a few more points per game and not have enjoyed as much winning. Whatever. Now let's go to the 1985 Dallas Mavericks, who are littered with Ted Stepien disasters when it comes to trades. Derek Harper, who was drafted by the Mavericks as a result of Cleveland and Stepien sending their 1983 and 1986 first-round picks for Richard Washington, who you've never heard of, as well as Jerome Whitehead, who I know you haven't heard of him as well. Harper went on to average 16 points and 7 assists for about 7 or 8 seasons. He spent time with Dallas, he spent time with the Knicks on Patrick Ewing's teams. He was a damn good point guard, one that I'm sure the Cavaliers would have loved to have had for a number of seasons. But Stepien, once again saying, I want to build a winner as quickly as possible. Yeah, you did a great job, man. I mean, the trades that Stepien performed, I don't even know if they're trades, they're more like sacrifices. They put Billy King to shame. There's also Sam Perkins, who was a double-digit scorer for a number of seasons in the NBA, a versatile wing, well, I should say more of a power forward, sometimes a center, sometimes a small forward. He should have been a Cleveland Cavalier as well. A lot of these trades came in the 1980 season. Stepien, he had the opportunity, he just went wild immediately. He decided to trade the 1984 first-round pick to the Mavericks for a guy by the name of Mike Bratz, who is apparently this guy. I don't know, I googled him and that's what popped up. He actually averaged 10 points a game once. I've never averaged 10 points a game, so that's cool, but Sam Perkins has averaged over 10 points a game a number of seasons. He was a very significant player in the Gary Payton and Sean Kemp Seattle Supersonics teams of the 90s. He was one of the first big guys who really embraced the three-point shot. And he was just a very good player that Stepien, he just wasn't about draft picks, man. I mean, he was there for 3 seasons, and he killed the Cavaliers forever. How do you trade 5 first-round picks in 3 years? It's actually kind of impressive. We have another one for you. Detlef Schrempf. All these guys were on the Mavericks at one time. You could actually ask yourself, how did the Mavericks manage to lose all these good players? But that's another story. In 1981, so Stepien had some time to think about this one. This all didn't just happen in the 1980 season. He traded the 1985 first-round pick for, it's either Jeff Houston or it's Huston. And when this is the picture that pops up on Google Images, I think you see what type of player he ended up becoming. And then Detlef, I mean, he was one of the first do-it-all big guys in the league. The best season he ever had. He averaged about 19 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists a game. He, as well as Sam Perkins, were 2 versatile players for those Seattle Sonics. And the Cavaliers, they could have had him. Then again, at this point, it was 1985. Maybe if they would have kept their other picks and had drafted at least some decent players, maybe they wouldn't have needed to draft a guy like Schrempf 5 years after Stepien actually took the job. But when you're the worst owner in NBA history, you kind of leave a mark that lasts for quite a few seasons. It's too bad, man. So just to recap, they lost the versatility of Schrempf. They could have had a very consistent and solid point guard in Derek Harper, who was probably one of the better guards in the league for almost a decade. Sam Perkins' development of an outside shot, as well as his double-digit scoring, could have been nice, but the big one is still James Worthy, because those guys... But the big one is still James Worthy. Why would you trade your first-round picks when you suck, man? Imagine the Knicks right now giving up their pick for like a backup shooting guard. That's basically what happened. But what makes it even worse is, if we look towards the future with the Cavs, they drafted Mark Price in like the 20s of when he was drafted, so he wasn't like a highly coveted player. So there's a decent chance that even if they would have not traded away all their picks and had been a better team, they maybe could have still gotten him, and they could have paired maybe one of these guys, if they would have gotten them, with Mark Price. And they could have had a nice duo with just Price and whoever, whether it be him and Detlef Schrempf, him and James Worthy, he and Sam Perkins, whoever it may be. Like, that could have been a damn good 1-2 punch. But you got none of that. So if we're ever giving someone like Billy King crap again, which we should because his deal was awful as well, just remember, there's always someone better than you, and that person is Ted Stepien. He had a lottery team, he traded away 5 straight first-round picks, he had like 5 different head coaches, his teams lost $15 million within the stretch of 3 years, and now the NBA doesn't let you trade first-round picks in successive seasons.